Welcome back to Trust Your Eyes. Finals week 2 was awesome. Friday night had just as much drama off the field than on it, while Brisbane pulled off a stunning comeback against the Giants. But we have to focus on Friday night. Everyone has had their say on Ken Hinkley and his post-game taunt to Jack Ginnivan. First of all, was Hinkley in the wrong, and was Hawthorn's reaction of disappointment fair? If he had his time again, would Ken Hinkley do that? Probably not. Was he in the wrong? I guess. But in this situation, we do need to add the context. And again, whether Jack Ginnivan was meaning harm in his comment on Brody Grundy's Instagram post, he probably wasn't, but he did indirectly take a shot at the Port Adelaide Football Club. And I think rightly so that they took that personally and came out and obviously won the game and played really well. So to me, again, it wasn't a great look, but it is fair game. Ginnivan took a shot indirectly, and Ken Hinkley in real life did take a shot back, and Ginnivan was a good sport. He was laughing. He took it on the chin. Now, for the Hawthorn side of things, did they overreact? I think so. Now, Sicily was on the field, so that's a little bit different. He's in the heat of the moment, so I forgive him a little bit. Sam Mitchell in his post-game presser, again, highly emotional. Did he try to make Ginnivan a victim? Sure he did it. That wasn't a great look. That was a little bit of sooking there. It just was. So I think if he had his time again, he probably wouldn't go in that direction. But again, it was pretty emotional. And just a quick word on those in the media like Jordan Lewis and Luke Hodge. I thought they were a bit embarrassing in their commentary, to be honest. It reeked of Hawthorn bias. And again, trying to use Ken Hinkley as kind of an older bully against Ginnivan was laughable. And the other laughable thing is the AFL recently just said Hinkley's getting a $20,000 fine for his actions, which is bizarre, it's wrong, and I don't quite get it. To the game itself, the statistics and general play was about as even as it can get. In a 3-point margin, all the little things count, so in a few details, how was the game decided from your viewpoint? Well, I think we have to go to the last quarter and those 3 goals that Port Adelaide kicked at the start of the quarter really quickly. It was in about 5 or 6 minutes of game time compared to the missed chances Hawthorn had at the other end, starting with James Sicily, which basically decided the game. It wasn't a great kick. It was always left that hitting the post did make it look a bit better. He also missed a pretty open goal not too long before that. And then Moore and Ginnivan missed snaps that on other days I think they would kick. So that was basically the difference in the last quarter. It was just the scoring opportunities Port Adelaide took them, while Hawthorn didn't. It was such an even game. It felt like each team had 10 minutes of dominance of their own, and then the other team would come back and have another 10 minutes. It was about as 50-50 a game can get. And a lot of Port Adelaide players played well, but a quick shout out to Jordan Sweet in the ruck, who I thought disarmed Lloyd Meek pretty well, got a lot of hit outs of advantage himself to his Port Adelaide midfielder, so I thought he was really good and beat Meek. And then Jace Burgoyne got the 10 coaches' votes, was outstanding. He looked far more comfortable coming out of defence and actually gave them another kicker and good distributor to help their offence, so hopefully that continues for the preliminary final. Brisbane pulled off the 3rd largest finals comeback in history, overcoming a 44-point deficit well into the 3rd quarter. The perfect question for this game is, did Brisbane win the game or did GWS lose it? I will talk about Brisbane later, but GWS did blow it, and it normally is the side that has the big lead that does lose it more than the other side wins it. I thought it was a bit different to the Sydney game. I thought GWS gave Sydney momentum with direct turnover goals, where to Brisbane's credit, I thought they initiated their momentum, and then when it came, the Giants started turning the ball over. They had horrible ball security. It felt like every time they got it, they hack-kicked it. Did wild handballs. Tom Green did a couple in the last quarter and gave the ball back to Brisbane. Lachlan Keefe, he missed a couple shots at goal, one in the last quarter. That was important. And then Brent Daniels, the most criminal act in football is that advantage playing on. He didn't even pick the ball up and kick the goal. He just soccer kicked it. It was the ultimate brain fade and really costly. But you have to give credit to Brisbane and especially Joe Danaher. Those 2 goals, really clutch. Not easy shots. The first one was basically from the boundary and it was perfect. And then the one after that to win the game I was thinking he was going to miss it because that's classic Joe. He'll kick the hard one and miss the easy one. But in his post-game interview, he did say he used the win. So credit to Joe. It was fantastic. He's kicked 16 goals in his last 5 finals and was really influential for Brisbane, who are now into another preliminary final. It's now 3 heartbreaking finals losses in a row for GWS, counting the 2023 preliminary final against Collingwood. Especially in these last 2 finals, where did it all go wrong for the Giants, and what can they actually do to improve closing out games? Well, it's pretty simple. They cannot handle the pressure and the opposition's momentum when it comes to them. Now, they're not the only ones, because most teams within the past few seasons have had a game or two where they struggle and the opposition kick 5 or 6 goals in a row. But in finals, obviously, the price you pay is far more expensive than that of games in the home and away season. But I think the number one thing is just that ball security and the hot potato mode they seem to go in. I think David King's made a few good points during the broadcast and after on SEN, saying they need to shift to a different mode during the games because maybe their high octane pressure and ball movement style can't last 120 minutes, so maybe they need to take 15 or 20 minutes per game and maybe try and play more kick mark, just so they have enough energy when the momentum of the opposition comes. But I do think most of it is in the head instead of tactical. I thought Adam Kingsley coached really well, not only in the semi-final, but since he's been at the Giants. So it's a difficult thing to train when there's nothing on the line, but I think the number one thing they'll be looking at is how to keep composure, how to keep the ball secure, give it to your teammate or wrap up instead of just wildly coughing up the ball like they did in these past 2 finals and therefore giving the opposition more momentum and more chances to punish you because, as we know, turnover is the king in the AFL. You have to win it to win the premiership and the Giants have been coughing up too many turnovers late in games. Focusing back on the winners in Port Adelaide and Brisbane, who are both prelim underdogs, what areas of their game can cause Sydney and Geelong problems? Well, starting on Port Adelaide, it is the midfield where I think this game will be won and lost because neither sides in Port Adelaide or Sydney have great key position talent. They don't have a lot of depth there. So if Horn, Francis, Butters and Rosie, as they did when they beat Sydney by 112 points, can have a lot of influence, then I think they're a big shot. They've won the last 8 games against Sydney and they should have a lot of confidence because of that. And if Willie Rioli plays like he did and Charlie Dixon can maybe kick 3 or 4 goals in a throwback performance, they're a big chance. So I think it's a good matchup for Port and Sydney will be a little bit nervous. Now for Brisbane against Geelong, I think that the best word to describe their advantage is just raw football talent, especially in the midfield. Lachie Neale should be fine, which is important, but if he can get going, Dunkley, McCluggage, Ashcroft, and then cameos from Rayner on ball with his power and strength, it could cause Geelong problems because we know Geelong are an ultra-professional unit and it's hard to see them collapsing like the Giants. And I just think Brisbane's best football has still been the best for the entire year. They have so many weapons, and I think if they could kick 3 or 4 goals out the gate, it might shock this Geelong side and put a bit of panic in them because we know when Cameron and Rayner and these guys are up and going, they're hard to stop and they can pile on scores quickly. So I think a good start's important, and if they can get that, I think Brisbane's a real big chance. But it's prediction time. The Friday night game is at the SCG as Sydney host the Power. Who wins and why? Something in the back of my mind is telling me to tip Port Adelaide, but I do think Sydney are the better team, but I think this is going to be a really close game, and I'm going to pick Sydney by about 15 points, in between that 2 to 3 goal range, but the game will be closer than a 15-point margin. I think Sydney might kick a goal or 2 late to extend the margin out, but I just really like this midfield battle for Port Adelaide. Now, I know Butters is banged up and Horn Francis was cramping at the end, and we don't know how fit Rosie is, but they're dynamic, they're hard to stop when they're on, and I just really like them. They're battle-hardened compared to Sydney, who have had a week off. Now, you could say that's an advantage, but sometimes in the first quarter or 2 where we know that's a weakness for Sydney, Port Adelaide might be able to get a 3 or 4 goal lead and put some doubt in the opposition's heads, but I'm going to back in Sydney's second halves, which have been fantastic, especially their last quarters. So I do think Port will get off to a nice start, maybe a 3 or 4 goal lead, but over the course of the game, just the attrition that Port Adelaide have faced compared to Sydney will be too much. The Swans will run over the top of them and book a place into their second grand final in the past 3 years. In the Saturday late afternoon time slot, Geelong hosts Brisbane at the MCG. So who gets over the line and why? Now, I did say before that Brisbane's best football is the best in the entire competition, but in body of work, I do have to pick Geelong in a similar margin to the Sydney game, maybe about a goal more. So I'll go Geelong by about 20 points. Over the entire course of 120 minutes, I think Geelong will be a bit more consistent. Brisbane will probably have spurts of 10 to 15 minutes of dominance, but as we can see against the Giants, their worst is pretty poor, and the consistency of Geelong, it's just too hard to pass up on when trying to tip this game. Jack Payne, I don't think, is fully fit. Jesse Hogan gave him a bit of a bath, and I think Jeremy Cameron, if they go with that matchup, could do the same. Now, I'm worried about Rayner and Bailey, Cameron, just these explosive guys who can have good games out of nowhere, but then again, I think I'm going to back in Stengel, Close, Myers, who are level-headed. They're 7 out of 10s every game to get the job done. And again, people will say that Geelong's midfield is a weakness. I'm not saying it's a weakness. I just think Brisbane's talent is still a bit better. But again, keep going through the names. Atkins, Dangerfield, they're always 7 out of 10s, really solid. So I have to back in Geelong. So therefore, I do think this will be a repeat of the 2022 Grand Final. Thanks for listening to Trust Your Eyes for Week 2 of Finals. I hope you enjoyed all the games, and I'll be back soon.